I want to welcome everyone today to our episode of the UNM Healthcast. We were formerly the UNM Health Hour pre-COVID, but once COVID came to us, we had to leave our cozy little recording studio and join the world on Zoom. So now we have these bite-sized discussions for you to engage with us and our communities. And today we have brought back Dr. Lori Medina, who is the director of the UNM Center for Life. And we are so grateful to have you back here today. Welcome, Dr. Medina.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be back. And I think it's wonderful that we're going through what you're going to introduce as a UNM Whole Health.
Yes. So last time we spoke, we talked a little bit about the concept of whole health and what it means to focus on not just our, physicals and checkups and things like that, but what it means to look at health as a whole entity around the different components of our lives and our lifestyles. So can you give us just a quick review of what whole health is and why it matters?
Whole health is looking at the individual as a true ecosystem and a collection of the mental, social, spiritual, physical, and lifestyle measures that go into someone's health. We are not simply a sore elbow or an allergy. We are entire ecosystems, and we are impacted by the world outside of us as well as the world inside of us. And we have a lot more choice, as we know that 80% of our healing and our health happens outside of what is going on in a doctor's office.
That's a large percentage. That's a really kind of a staggering statistic. So one of the things I want to just check in with folks about before we dive into our specific topic for today is the whole health wheel. And so the graphic that you're looking at is your whole health graphic. It covers the social, environmental, physical, emotional, and personal aspects of our lives, which you can see are then broken down into even smaller and more compact, more specific categories, such as your mental health, sleep health, exercise, safety, community, and nutrition. And while nutrition is a very popular component of health that people always want to talk about, and we will absolutely have an episode where Dr. Medina and I talk about nutrition, today we're going to talk about something that's even more relevant to folks right now, which is community, and why community is such an important component of our health, and how we can look toward the immediate and hopefully not too distant future in terms of re-engaging with our communities in a post-COVID world, or a world rather where we live with COVID and vaccines. So Dr. Medina, can you please tell us a little bit about community and what it means to think about community in terms of our health?
Well, we know that how we relate with those around us really impacts our health in a huge way. If you are socially connected, you have a greater than 50% chance of surviving from whatever things might be thrown your way. Conversely, if you describe yourself as lonely or socially isolated, you have an increased risk of dying by over 30% by all-cause mortality. And that is even more pronounced for individuals that have in the past been marginalized. These numbers are similar to the health effects brought on by obesity, smoking, sedentariness, and air pollution. So it's really a big deal. And this is also independent of your age or your underlying health status, which is somewhat surprising, because you would think, if you're older and sicker, you'd be more vulnerable to these factors. Your risk, if you have poor social connections, of developing heart disease is over 30%, as well as your risk of having a stroke is 32%. It also contributes to inflammatory processes in your body, increases your risk of depression, diabetes, and dementia, as well as even slowing wound healing and affecting your sleep. So those are all the bad things, but we're going to move on to good stuff. But this is how important it is. And these are things that you have control over. You can take the first step, as many of us will have to do as we emerge from this pandemic.
Right. So we've all learned, we've heard a lot at this point about the ways to stay socially connected during COVID, like having Zoom happy hours and making sure to have, phone calls and check-ins and, doing what we can to be safe, but also not isolated. And obviously, still, many of us are struggling with that lack of human connection and human interaction that we've experienced over the past, more than a year now. So what are some of the things that, I mean, we're going to stay on the negative just for a sec before we shift gears. What are some of the things that we're all, dealing with as a result of this kind of new isolation and having to reorient ourselves to connect with our communities in ways that aren't quite as complete as we're used to?
Well, the first and probably most important thing to realize is none of us are alone. We've all lived this together worldwide. And all the things that we might feel a little personally embarrassed about or a little shy about going out in public, maybe we've gained a little more weight than we intended to. Maybe we lost weight. Maybe we are concerned about, have we lost our social skills? If you are single and dating, do you know how to talk to somebody still? All these things, and again, they're very common factors. There was a study that was just completed and published at the beginning of this month from the American Psychological Association that said more than 50% of us are experiencing this anxiety. And it's completely unrelated to our vaccine status. It's not just fear of catching or giving someone the vaccine. It's these social factors that we're being impacted by. Likewise, we mentioned the weight issue. More than 60% of individuals have had an unintended change in their weight over the last year. We've all been living in yoga pants and sweatpants. And again, the thing to remember is that we are all in it together. Even essential workers and healthcare providers report over 54% have used unhealthy behaviors to cope with the stress of the pandemic. So I think the first step in connecting with other people is that realizing we've all lived through the same thing. And hence we are, just bottom line, more connected than we realize.
Yeah, that's a really great thing to remember. I know that when I first emerged into an actual public space with actual people in it, fully masked and getting just like an ice cream treat, but it was, like a big food hall space. And so there were quite a few people there. It was a weekend. So it felt really jarring just to be near that many humans that I didn't know. Because it had been so long and we just acclimated, we are creatures of habit, but we're also very adaptable. So we created these habits over the past year plus of being in our tight knit circles and being, by ourselves a lot. So it can just feel really startling from, at least in my personal experience, psychologically, to think like, oh, you're here, you're close to me. What's happening? Is this okay? And it just is all, I was way more on edge than I anticipated being. So I think that the anxiety you're talking about has a lot of different facets to it. And yes, it is helpful to remember, like, a lot of other people in that space also are probably feeling a little unnerved by just being near strangers again.
And exactly what you describe about, hey, are you too close? Are you too, are you shaking hands? Are you still doing the elbow? What are we doing here? I think the most important thing is for all of us have different boundaries, and for all of us to establish our boundaries. And it's going to look different for everyone out there. And however, it's really important from a mental health well-being for all of us to take on those things that do create anxiety. It doesn't mean you have to go from hiding in your living room, not that Albuquerque has subways, to riding a subway. However, you can begin doing this in small doses that are comfortable for you. Hopefully you have your 5 people that are closest to you that you have maybe had some interaction with. And if you haven't, pick your circle of 5 and slowly start expanding from there as you feel comfortable and as your health allows. Gyms in different exercise facilities are reopening. If you're comfortable doing that, obviously taking appropriate hand washing and wiping down equipment precautions, as well as masking up when you're there. Most facilities are practicing extremely safe practices. They still have limitations on class sizes. However, I think you can deal with some of your anxiety by realizing the downside of remaining anxious is having much worse health effects on you than beginning to take these small, calculated risks, if you want to call it that, because that's how we all perceive it. I think the other thing to do as you start reemerging in the world is to think about what activities you missed most. Was it your group class? Was it a dinner out with your friends? And find ways to begin incorporating those back in your life in a way that feels safe to you. Is your class now meeting outside? If you're more comfortable having a picnic with your friends in the park, having that much space around you, what works for you? And again, recognizing and honoring your own boundaries and those of other people as well.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And to segue into the positives that we promised earlier, what are some of the health benefits from, taking these, as you put it, calculated risks and putting yourself back out into communal spaces and shared experiences and, engaging with people not in a digital realm, but more in person again? What can we expect to feel health-wise as a result of engaging with our communities?
Well, humans, we are meant to be social animals, and we will truly die. We've done, back many decades ago, they did experiments with monkeys, and monkeys need social connection to survive. And it's not just occurring as young. It needs to happen throughout the life spectrum, as well as if you haven't engaged in any kind of physical activity, you are suffering from some of these negative consequences, not just of the isolation, but most likely some weight gain, some of, we know exercise is beneficial in helping just about every single chronic disease, every single lifestyle disease. And again, taking it slow. It doesn't matter if you're a marathon runner. If you haven't left your living room, you might want to start with a walk in the park. Yeah. We know that being out in nature is beneficial to all of us from a mental health standpoint, from a physical standpoint. We need to connect. And if you can connect with another human being in the natural environment, it's so much the better. The other thing, too, is to realize that there are so many organizations that have lost their pool of volunteers. And if you go to a website, volunteermatch.org, and you put in Albuquerque, you can find opportunities to begin volunteering. And we know that individuals that volunteer experience both their own personal health benefits and they're able to help the community and those that they're interacting with. Again, if you have concerns about being out in a public space, they also have opportunities to volunteer in the virtual space. Because for some people that alone might be enough just to see other faces. They have opportunities to volunteer for pets. So you can begin, and we know animals help lower blood pressure and stress. Perhaps going back, if you're a person that worships in a traditional sense, perhaps going back and connecting with that community. Because we know individuals that have some type of a spiritual practice have better health overall.
Yes, and I think that there are, it's important to emphasize that, even if you don't traditionally practice religion in the context that we might think of it, something that I was introduced to over the course of the pandemic was a meditation class that I did online, and I had not ever really made it a formal practice. I've done yoga a lot, but I've never done meditation formally, and I feel super interested and drawn to the idea of doing a meditation class with people in the world. So it can be a spiritual practice of, lots of different varieties, and because it does feel to me, this is a sidebar, but it feels spiritual to me to live in that meditative space. And I can only imagine that that's even, more elevated when you're able to connect with the people in an actual room together, as opposed to just meditating together on Zoom. So yeah, I think that that's really great. So volunteermatch.org is the name of that website. And volunteering also is one example of how to connect with your community and therefore boost your community health benefits, which are so wonderful, and that we've all, been deprived of a little bit over the past 13 months or so. Is there anything else that you want our listeners and viewers to know about the importance of community as it factors into our health that we've not discussed?
Well, one thing I'd like to touch on, both since you brought up meditation, I do think a lot of people think of it as a religious practice, and certainly it can with some of the Eastern practices. And some of the Western practices have things like contemplative prayer. However, the best known stress reduction system is a very secular meditation system called Mindfulness-Based stress reduction. And we do have programs offered through Center for Life on that. And the creator of it, John Kabat-Zinn, also made his videos available online through Wisdom 2.0, and they're free online. So if that is something you would like to participate in, either just for your own interest or as a way of dealing with the stress created by social anxiety, that's a resource for you there. We also know that informal meditative practices, such as there's cues when your phone buzzes, when you're sitting at a red light, using those moments to check in and doing some deep breathing activates what we call your parasympathetic system. We've all heard of the fight or flight system, which is the system that helped us run away from dinosaurs back in when we were living out in prehistoric land. Well, certainly in the last year, I would say most of us have existed in that amped up fight or flight stage. And this division was thought of as the only two divisions of our nervous system, the fight or flight, and then the parasympathetic, the more relaxation response oriented. There's some writing and some research now talking about a third branch, which is social connectedness. However, to access that social connectedness, you have to be in that parasympathetic state. So if you're amped up, on edge, you're not going to connect very well with someone. Whereas if you can do a couple of these, just 3 deep breaths, sitting at the stoplight on your way out to your first stop at the grocery shop, your first gym visit, whatever it is, you will then be in a better physical and mental state of mind to engage with other people in a way that feels good to you.
Absolutely. It actually was an MBSR course that I took during COVID that was really, really helpful in terms of keeping me centered and easing my anxiety. I was introduced to meditation during my graduate school program, and we had someone come in and work with us as writers, talking to us about one good breath. So we always used to talk about, make jokes about getting him a necklace that said OGB, one good breath, because it's such a great space.
And oftentimes that's all we have time for. And oftentimes that's enough. And I think giving yourself credit for that. The other place I wanted people to explore, and I'm not from Albuquerque, so my actual list of community resources is limited to what I could find online. However, there are some community gardens out there. Mm-hmm. And what a wonderful way to perhaps grow some of your own healthy fruits and vegetables, to connect with other people out there. And again, you're outside. And the risk of getting sick is so much lower outside. than anywhere inside. And you're getting your vitamin N, your vitamin nature when you're out there.
Love that. Yeah, we didn't visit the actual status of the CDC guidelines right now, but I think it's important that we do that just in terms of acknowledging the steps that are safe to take in terms of reconnecting with people in person as more and more folks become vaccinated. Can you touch on those a little bit, just in terms of what has been deemed like reasonable, low risk activities to engage in with when you and your loved ones and people that you're closest to, who you may miss very much, are all getting vaccinated?
Right. So I would just simply encourage people to go to the CDC website, because they're changing on a daily basis, and they change day to day, if not county by county. So I would, again, it's about you, where you are living and your comfort level. Certainly, if getting vaccinated is something that you would like to participate in, and you haven't taken that step yet, I encourage you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great thing to keep in mind. So for folks who are curious about the vaccine, you can go to the New Mexico Department of Health. And if you have specific questions about guidelines, you can, I'm sure, just Google, do an internet search for CDC guidelines and your community, your city, your county, your state, any of those things, and you'll find the specific guidelines that will help give you some guidance and some parameters about what is very low risk for you to engage in with your loved ones in your communities. So we've talked about remembering you're not alone in your reentry anxiety, taking your, even if you don't have time for something like a meditation course, taking your 1 to 3 good breaths to help ground you and ease some of your anxiety or feelings of stress around these issues, reconnecting with people at your comfort zone and your rate of ease, and making sure that you find, I loved your idea about finding the things that you miss most and really just focusing on maybe 1 or 2 things to start to bring yourself back into the world. I think that's really great. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today in terms of community and health and rejoining the world slowly but surely?
One thing I definitely wanted to put out there, particularly if you find yourself in the category of people that, for whatever reason, are experiencing such a high degree of anxiety that you just can't go out and start doing any of these things. Many of the mental health providers out there are doing telehealth visits. I know we are still doing telehealth visits. So I would strongly encourage you to, whether it's for your mental health or your physical health, if you are uncomfortable going out, continue to attend to those things. Continue, make a telehealth appointment to help you deal with your anxiety, because the sooner we deal with whatever is making us anxious, the better off we're going to be in all aspects of our life. The sooner we look under the bed to see whether or not there's really a monster there, the better off we're going to be. And likewise, if we know that delaying certain preventative health tests, it didn't matter maybe for 6 months or a year. However, if you have a new physical finding, particularly an alarm signal, unexpected bleeding, new lumps or bumps, changes in your skin, changes in how you're able to eat, those are really important things that you need to attend to. So through whatever modality, you need to begin addressing it, because oftentimes it's just beginning. It's just getting your first foot on the floor to go out and take your walk before you go to work. Once you do that, you're there.
That's really great. Thank you so much for chatting with us again today, Dr. Medina. It's been really illuminating as always. Right before we got on the podcast, our producer told me that last time we talked, he learned a lot about the resources we offer at UNM. So it's been really wonderful. And I look forward to continuing to go through our whole health journey. For those of you who saw the wheel graphic that illuminates the whole health components and felt really interested in something like sleep or safety, Don't worry. Dr. Medina and I are going to touch base on all of those points. So we'll bring you more episodes about your whole health as the UNM Healthcast continues. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Medina.
Well, and thank you everyone for really taking that first step, because until we take stewardship of our own health, we're not any good for anybody else out there. So thank you all for being here and listening.
Thanks so much, Dr. Medina.